إيجابية إن شاء الله.
Good afternoon, you're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's top stories. A fugitive detonates an explosive belt during a North Lebanon army raid, killing himself and 3 family members. At least 6 others are wounded. Future Movement Secretary General Ahmed al-Hariri warns of chaos and violence if the settlement devised by the movement's leader Saad Hariri to end the crisis isn't adopted. And Iraq calls on Turkey to immediately withdraw its troops from Iraq's north, calling their presence a violation of Iraqi sovereignty. A fugitive has detonated an explosive belt during a North Lebanon army raid, killing himself and 3 family members and wounding at least 6 others. A security source says Mohammed Hamzi, a suspect who is allegedly wanted for belonging to an extremist group and engaging in battles with the army, tossed a grenade at the raid unit in the town of Deir Ammar, leading to an exchange of fire. He was soon trapped inside a room where he blew himself up using an explosive belt made of 4 bombs, killing himself, his wife, mother, and niece. The security source said Hamzi was linked to the group of notorious Islamist militant Osama Mansour, who was killed in April. Future Movement Secretary General Ahmed al-Hariri says Lebanon can no longer endure the presidential vacuum and warned that chaos and violence could result if the settlement devised to resolve the political crisis wasn't adopted. He warned, quote, if the initiative fails to reach a compromise and the vacuum goes on for a few more months, a president will not be elected on a slow burner, but through blood. Hariri stressed that the initiative launched by Future Movement leader MP Saad Hariri is aimed at saving Lebanon from collapse. Efforts are underway to reach an agreement over the nomination of Marada Movement leader MP Sleiman Frangi as president, and his emergence as a candidate has also led to talks of a political settlement. However, there are voices of dissent among the Ghata'a Party, the Lebanese forces, the Free Patriotic Movement, and some March 14 officials over his nomination. French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius says the departure of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad is no longer necessary before any political transition in the war-torn country. In comments published in the French regional newspaper Le Progrès, Fabius said the fight against Daesh is crucial, but it will only be totally effective if all the Syrian and regional forces are united. The comments mark a softening of Paris's position on the Syrian president as attention turned to the fight against the Islamic State group, which staged a series of bloody attacks on the French capital last month. Until now, France, along with Washington and other Western powers fighting ISIS, have long insisted Assad must step down as part of any political solution to the 4-year Syrian conflict. And coming up next, UN negotiators approve a new draft text as a step towards a new deal to curb climate change. More details after the break. Welcome back. Iraq has called on Turkey to immediately withdraw its troops from Iraq's north, calling their presence a violation of Iraqi sovereignty. Prime Minister Haidar al-Abadi said no permission had been given for the stationing of around 1 armed battalion of Turkish soldiers in the northern Nineveh area near Mosul. Iraq's foreign ministry described the Turkish deployment as an incursion and rejected any military operation that was not coordinated with the government in Baghdad. A Turkish security official said the troops had been in the Kurdish region of northern Iraq on a training mission since last year. Moving on to the U.S., the Islamic State said the married couple who killed 14 people in California in an attack the FBI is investigating as an act of terrorism were followers of the militant group based in Syria and Iraq. The group's declaration in an online radio broadcast comes 3 days after U.S.-born Syed Rizwan Farouk, 28, and his spouse Tashfeen Malik, 29, a native of Pakistan, carried out the attack on a holiday party for civil servants in San Bernardino, about 100 kilometers east of Los Angeles. The 2 died hours later in a shootout with police on Wednesday. As the FBI announced the deadly assault was an act of terrorism, critics warned, however, that Islam, the attacker's religion, should not become the main focus of the investigation. U.S. President Barack Obama says the U.S. will not be terrorized and renewed his call for tighter gun control in measures in a weekly address, which focused on the deadly attack in California. Obama vowed investigators will get to the bottom of how and why the rampage occurred.
It is entirely possible that these two attackers were radicalized to commit this act of terror. And if so, it would underscore a threat we've been focused on for years: the danger of people succumbing to violent extremist ideologies. We know that ISIL and other terrorist groups are actively encouraging people around the world and in our country to commit terrible acts of violence, oftentimes as lone wolf actors. And even as we work to prevent attacks, all of us, government, law enforcement, communities, faith leaders, need to work together to prevent people from falling victim to these hateful ideologies. More broadly, this tragedy reminds us of our obligation to do everything in our power together to keep our communities safe. We know that the killers in San Bernardino used military-style assault weapons, weapons of war, to kill as many people as they could. It's another tragic reminder that here in America, it's way too easy for dangerous people to get their hands on a gun. For example, right now, people on the no-fly list can walk into a store and buy a gun. That's insane. If you're too dangerous to board a plane, you're too dangerous by definition to buy a gun. And so I'm calling on Congress to close this loophole now. We may not be able to prevent every tragedy, but at a bare minimum, we shouldn't be making it so easy for potential terrorists or criminals to get their hands on a gun that they could use against Americans. Today in San Bernardino, investigators are searching for answers. Across our country, law enforcement professionals are tireless. They're working around the clock, as always, to protect our communities. As president, my highest priority is the security and safety of the American people. This is work that should unite us all as Americans, so that we're doing everything in our power to defend our country. That's how we can honor the lives we lost in San Bernardino. That's how we can send a message to all those who would try to hurt us. We are Americans. We will uphold our values in our free and open society. We are strong and we are resilient, and we will not be terrorized.
Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump has attended a campaign rally in Raleigh, North Carolina, and was asked what he would do to respond to events in San Bernardino. Have a listen.
Over the last couple of weeks, since we had the tragedy, we all had the tragedy in Paris, now we had another one, which again was the same thing. How about the person that knew what was going on said they didn't want to report them because they think it might be racial profiling? Did you see that? No, did you see that? And I'm not sure, do I believe the person? Can anybody be that dumb? But they didn't want to report because they didn't want to be involved with racial profiling. We have become so politically correct that we don't know what the hell we're doing. We don't know what we're doing. It was a terrorist attack. It was a terrorist attack.
How would you handle that?
Oh, I would handle it so tough, you have no idea. You don't want to hear. You don't even want to hear. You don't want to hear how I'd handle it. I will get myself in so much trouble with them. We are going to handle it so tough. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to get it stopped. Because we can't allow this to happen to our country. We're going to get it stopped. And by the way, if the people in Paris or the people in California, if you had a couple of folks in there with guns and that knew how to use them, and they were in that room, you wouldn't have dead people. The dead people would be the other guys. So just remember that. Remember that, right? Oh, here's another one. Here's another one. Look at this guy. Get him out. Get him out. Get him out, please.
And across the Pacific, tens of thousands of protesters have marched in the South Korean capital, Seoul, accusing President Park Geun-hye of pushing pro-businesses labor laws and attacking personal and political freedoms. The march was organized by labor, farmer, and civic groups opposing what they call the president's effort to glorify her father's authoritarian rule. An estimated crowd of 30,000 people marched through the city center en masse, many wearing masks in defiance of Park's call for a ban on mask wearing during demonstrations. Park's administration is facing mounting resentment over a range of issues, including her plan to impose new history textbooks on schools, to further open the agricultural market and reform the labor market by making the dismissal of workers easier and cutting wages for older workers. United Nations senior negotiators have approved a new draft text as a step towards a new global deal to curb climate change. The text, to be discussed by ministers next week and still containing hundreds of points of disagreement, was endorsed just in time for a midday deadline after negotiators talked through the night. Greenpeace cautiously welcomed the text, saying ambitious options are still included, but regrets that the goal of 100% renewables by 2050 is still missing.
It contains its elements.
It's quite remarkable that there is no procedural fight going on in these corridors here in Paris, and there seems to be a huge will to come to an agreement by the end of next week. With the current text on the table, there are still strong options which could help to limit global warming far below 1.5 or 2 degrees. What is still missing in the text is a clear vision to go 100% renewable energy by mid-century, which gives us a chance to help those people who suffer most from catastrophic climate change. There's a broad political will to come to a global agreement here in Paris, and this is really good news. It doesn't say anything about the outcome here in Paris and which options will be chosen. There's a huge risk that at the end of the conference we will land with the lowest common denominator, which doesn't contribute to the development in the outside world, which is already on a long pace and a strong pace towards renewable energies. For good reasons, poor countries are asking for a lot of support. On the one hand, for the transformation from coal, oil and gas towards renewable energy, but even more for adapting to catastrophic climate change. And without addressing this question of financial and technological support, there won't be a balance which leads to a good outcome here in Paris.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of the headlines. A fugitive detonates an explosive belt during a North Lebanon army raid, killing himself and 3 family members. At least 6 others are wounded. Future Movement Secretary General Ahmed al-Hariri warns of chaos and violence if the settlement devised by the movement's leader Saad Hariri to end the crisis isn't adopted. And Iraq calls on Turkey to immediately withdraw its troops from Iraq's north, calling their presence a violation of Iraqi sovereignty. Those were your headlines for today. I'm Linda Tamim, wishing you all a very lovely weekend.
أجواء إيجابية إن شاء الله.